on silent. Yep.
And there we go. Good morning.
Good morning.
We are live here in Barrie this morning. It's super hot already, and they say it's going to get terrible,
It's
even
gonna be
worse than it
disgusting
is right
today.
now. Yeah, rain, storms, hail, high winds, just what we wanted. Um, but good morning. We're here with Bridget Grace this morning and super close to Election Day,
Less than a
August
week
9th.
left.
August 9th.
Yep.
It doesn't seem possible that we are already there, um, but we are. So
We are certainly ready to be there.
I'm sure you are. And now you said you've been up super early this morning because you've been busy already.
I got up at 4 this morning so I could go with Montpelier PD and it was Montpelier, Northfield, Capitol Police, Washington County Sheriff's Department, and we had some federal agents, and I'm probably missing people, but all for a search warrant that happened in Montpelier this morning.
Which
And
is wonderful.
I'm not the one disclosing that. Montpelier already posted about it on their Facebook
Yes,
page.
and I heard it on the news before I even got here. So yeah, WCAX was down there trying to get video of what was happening. So I knew just as I was leaving the house that I saw it actually. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so you're
I didn't
good.
realize it had made it that far
It-
already.
Of course it did. Yeah, so I knew that I could out that a little bit too. So with just a few days to go, are you out and about constant, or are you still right in the office?
No, I mean, I still have to go to work, obviously, but we've been out. Luckily, Mike, my partner, has been going and doing honkin' waves for me, and he should be, I think, here today in Barrie if the weather allows. He'll be down here, and then I think in Waterbury on Friday. So
Yeah, and perfect day to be down here, or night. The concert's in the park also,
yes,
if weather permits. Otherwise, it'll be up at the BOR. But we should let him know that, so that if they're not on one end of town, they make sure they go to the other.
Yes, yeah.
So that he knows where everybody will probably be.
Yep.
Yeah, so that would be great. So I actually, ahead of time, had put out a post and have had several people actually send me some questions. So
Awesome.
if you don't mind, we can
of course.
ask those first because it's what people are most curious about. And one of them being the youthful offender. So many would like to know your thoughts on the age change and about youthful offender programs that they would like to know if they exist, what they are, and how that is determined when a case is brought to you.
Yeah, so some of it is it depends on what the charges are, and of course it depends on the age of the defendant. So right now it is up to, I think we're at 19 at this point, where you can, as long as you're under 19 for certain charges, it's going to go right to the juvenile court, and that's how it's handled. I think there's a lot of research out there about brain development and the frontal lobe not being developed until around the age of 25, which is kind of what led to the change in the law and the increase of age. I know people have a lot of feelings about this. And I think in the past first of all, we've always taken into account the age of an offender, and in the past, you would have seen a lot of times if they were that young, picking up charges, likely a deferred sentence. So something that would leave them with the ability to have it off of their record. And so this avenue also provides that, as long as they're, in compliance with whatever the sentence is. So it can get sent back to the criminal court if they continue to pick up charges, if they're in violation. And I think, the age is supposed to increase again. It was put off. We do need, a lot of this has been kind of put into DCF's lap to supervise. And so I think we do need to make sure we've got the people and the services trained and ready for when we increase that load, when the age increases again. So I think certain charges make sense to go to youthful offender, or the delinquency path, and other stuff I don't agree with. I don't feel as that when it's something that you've thought out and planned, I don't see that as something that should go to youthful offender. Then we're not talking about the whole reason on the frontal lobe thing is that you don't appreciate risk, and that's kind of the frontal lobe is what helps you like appreciate risk and think about consequences and stuff like that. And so I think when you have stuff that like happens over time, is planned out, I don't see that. I don't see how that
there's already
we can
a
make
development,
that argument.
an obvious development. Yep. And what is the current age?
So right now it is to be filed for certain charges to be filed in as a delinquency. It's up to 19, and then it is it's up to 22. You can file to be considered for youthful offender. And so there's a whole process. There's a hearing that happens to make that determination. And so that, there's a whole, and it doesn't, just because they go over for youthful offender consideration, it doesn't mean it ends up being accepted into the
that it would be
as youthful offender.
And what are they looking to raise it to? Do we know?
I would have to look. I think it's 20, but I'd have to reread the statute. I haven't looked at it.
I thought
in a
it
little
was
bit.
too, but I wasn't positive if it because it was. I think it's the 19 and up to 21 depending, and I think they were looking at 20 and even possible up to 25 depending.
I think there's been talk of that. Yes. Yeah. I think we definitely have to make sure. And I was in the Northeast Kingdom when the law first came into effect for youthful offender, and being able to transfer things into the juvenile court. And the biggest issue we ran into was not having the services there for kids. Kids, they're adults technically, but for the people who were potentially being transferred over. So that was the biggest issue we saw up there, and so I think they've held off for a year on the increasing the age, and so hopefully we can get the services and the people in place and to make it go a little bit more smoothly this next jump.
Yeah, that would be great. And then one of the other questions was the court calendars. Those are, of course, anybody can go online. You can look up, you could do offender locator. You can look at court cases coming up. And there have been some comments and questions about the fact that a lot of times, most of the cases on certain days are marked confidential. And so they would like to know why that is.
So I think if you're seeing that on the criminal docket, usually it means sometimes they're confidential until probable cause has been found. So sometimes it just that hasn't been marked in the system, and so it just continues to come up as confidential. And other times it may be some. I'm trying to think of when something would be confidential. But it's rare that it's an actual confidential hearing. It's usually, if you're seeing it on the calendar come up as confidential,
Right.
it's
It
just,
doesn't mean that that doesn't identify it as a youth. It just means that they haven't been arraigned, and you don't know if they'll even be arraigned.
Yeah.
Maybe something happens in the meantime and you can't even charge.
And I don't know. So if you're talking about the criminal calendar, it's different than the juvenile. Obviously, the juvenile does not list
Ever.
They don't list the names ever. No. So I think it's been a little while since I looked at that calendar, but I think it's just the attorneys' names that are involved that are
in
listed
the criminal
on
side.
On the juvenile
side.
Because you can look up what hearings are on for the juvenile court as well. You wouldn't be able to attend them, but they don't list.
Usually
who
it just says the advocate and the attorneys.
Yeah.
And I actually, when what happened this morning in Montpelier, a lot of times after the names come out in the paper, there have been times where people are held, and the biggest gripe is catch and release, and so where people are held, and that isn't what people necessarily believe. They think that they're gone.
Yep.
And no, they were released, and it's so easy to find out yourself if you want to know. And even if you want to know if somebody's on probation or who they're being supervised by, that information is there. It's definitely not hidden.
If you go to the offender locator website, you can type. You just need the person's name, and it will give you information about if they are incarcerated, where they're incarcerated. I believe it also lists the charges that they're incarcerated on.
It does.
Or under supervision on. And if they're under sentence, it'll also list who their probation or parole officer is, who their caseworker is at the facility. It gives a lot of good information if you're interested in keeping track of someone or finding out about someone. If you're a victim, we do have I think it's called VANS is the system that you can sign up, and it will notify you if someone is moved from the facility, if they're released, when they're released, that kind of information they will give you.
Yeah, if they have any status change at all.
Yeah.
And that poses the next question, which is, do you agree with that system where that is a public information where anybody can get the information?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to be able to find that information out. I mean, honestly, we use it all the time. So, yeah, I think it's a good, and I don't know how much I don't know that the public generally knows about the website, but I do think it should be something that people are able to access, and especially if you're having an issue with someone and they're under supervision. I mean, then you have that avenue of being able to report it to their probation officer. So
right, you know who to contact and how, and you know where they are.
Yeah.
Essentially, who's being supervised, and so let's see. And then the next question, my gosh, is about the recent drug cases and the recent drug bust. Maybe this will come up and be a part of the one in Montpelier this morning as well. But the out-of-staters and the massive amounts of drugs, when is that determined that it goes to federal court? Is that something that the state takes first and they do the charges, and then the feds investigate and decide if they're going to take over?
So it depends. Sometimes it's always with the feds, and they have it the entire time. Other times we'll start the charges and they can take over. It's usually if there are the amount of drugs and firearms are usually the big ones for the feds to take them. So, but it can go either way, I guess. It can start with them. It can start with us. A lot of times it will start with us, and then they take over it.
And then we go to racial disparities. Do you feel that we're ready to handle those sorts of things. This person asking the question doesn't think that we're probably there on a huge level in Washington County yet, but the makeup of the community is definitely changing. And do you think that your office is prepared to deal with discrepancies, or do you feel that there are any already?
So let me back up. I think we're ready to deal with it and start looking at it. Do I see discrepancies? No, but I think we're at this point, we're in this community, we don't see enough, I think, to be exposed enough to it. But I do think, as far as racial bias and that kind of stuff, there are trainings that are happening, and our officers are participating in that, and I think that's huge. And I think everyone should have that training and go through that. I think
so. Your office as well.
Yeah. I think it's important. I think we all have our own biases, and we need to be able to address it and talk about it. And I think if we don't do it as a whole, we're never going to actually address the issue there.
The entire issue.
So yeah, it always reminds me, talking about that. I went to law school in Detroit, and I did a teaching law in high school class when I was in law school. And so I had to actually teach in a Detroit high school. And it was such an amazing experience for me because, I grew up here. I grew up in Washington County, and it exposed for me, the things walking into that school. I thought, oh, it's a dangerous school. These are dangerous kids, and they were a wonderful class, and I kept in touch with them for a while. Unfortunately, I haven't continued to keep in touch with them, but I think that was one of the best experiences I had in law school.
For you, just so that you could see.
Yeah. So, yeah.
It's not as scary as you may have believed because you grew up here. What about?
Well, and it addressed my own biases.
Right.
So.
Yeah. The stigmas and the thoughts of it. What about men to women? Do you think that the charges and the terms and jail terms and stuff, do you think that they're equal or need some work too? Or
no, I feel like it's equal. I feel like when I think about what people are receiving for sentences, I think it's fair. As far as when we're talking about male to female, I think probably when we see discrepancies more is when we're talking about domestic assault stuff. Just because it's so rare that we get a case where it's a male victim or a female offender in that situation, and I think we tend to think, okay, we'll go easier on this person than if it was the reverse. So, but I do think it's something that we think about, we talk about, and try to address. So,
right, and do mitigating circumstances sometimes come to play if you have a mom with 3 kids and
of course,
I've heard that they could maybe commit the same sort of crime, but not necessarily do the same sort of time because of their obligation to their family and their children. And that's actually come up a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly something it's something that we consider in sentencing. It's your, what's going on in your life? What do you have going on? And, we don't want to put kids in a situation where they're having to come into custody because a parent's going to jail. Sometimes it's necessary.
Inevitable.
And it has to happen. But it's certainly something that we take into consideration. The court's going to take into consideration. But that shouldn't, I think it happens for both male and female. So if men who have children, we're looking at that as well.
So there's no, and then back to the kids a little bit as far as different crimes, and this is a question that I've had for a long time, um, just because of my own life and my own history. And uh, when youths commit drug crimes or they're caught with drugs, how would you feel about having some sort of mandatory treatment, or that it was dealt with as soon as a problem
Mm-hmm.
arose at a young age, instead of waiting and having the crimes continue until, sometimes 4 or 5 years in a row? As they get older, the crimes get bigger. Um, what are your thoughts on how that could maybe be addressed from the get-go?
Yeah, I do think there's ways of getting youth into treatment when they come in on these charges, and I do think it's important that we get them into treatment to address you know to address that addiction issue. Obviously, if someone's unwilling to engage in treatment, that we can't force anyone to do it. But I do believe that, and a lot of times, you whether we're talking about youth or on the criminal side, if someone's coming in on just a misdemeanor possession charge, we're sending that to Tamarack with the hope that we're addressing, with the hope to address the underlying addiction issue and hopefully resolve it in a way that avoids them having that criminal prosecution conviction.
And then we have thoughts on family preventative programming. I'm not even really sure what that is.
So I know we have, I don't know if they're talking about I'm trying to think of the parenting class that they just started up at the CJC. But I think programs like that are helpful. And I think that kind of stuff is great. Helping out people who are, I think anything that we can use to stop the cycle is great. I don't know that we have enough of it in Washington County. I know we have some, but I do think those programs are important.
Let's see. They're coming in fast and furious. So we did the thoughts. What about drug dealing with death resulting? I actually get this question a lot and have had curiosities myself in regards to that. How is that charged? It's not charged as a homicide, or
No, it's actually a specific charge of distribution with death resulting, and they're difficult charges, just because we're having to go back and look through phone records and trying to find the evidence to bring forth the charge. So it takes some time sometimes to get those charges out, charged, just because the investigation takes time, and obviously it doesn't have as severe a penalty as a homicide would, but it does still, a lot of times we're talking about a jail sentence or some sort of incarcerative period on the sentence, and that's one of those charges that people get very polarized on. Some people feel like, oh, you took the drugs, you chose to do it to yourself, and obviously people who have had friends, family that have died from it, I think obviously feel very strongly that someone should be punished for providing that drug and that led to their death.
I would wonder if the difficulty too is, my assumption is the majority of the people here in Vermont are getting the drugs somewhere else, obviously, and I would hope that they weren't cutting in, well, they do. They bring the fentanyl here separately, and so then they knowingly sell this drug. But it must be difficult to bring charges against just them without knowing, because isn't the person that actually gave them this
Sure,
stuff
sure, yeah.
also accountable in some way? And um, I can't
Going
even.
higher up the chain, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
And
mean, there are people who are making a lot of money off these drugs that are not getting charged, and I think it's people have to be willing to give up the information that they have.
do you think that the charges should maybe be more significant than they are right now when there is a death and you were somebody who clearly had fentanyl and heroin, or fentanyl and cocaine, so you knew you were distributing this drug that
Yeah,
had a
I think
huge potential of killing?
it's hard because so many times that the person who's distributing it is also using it themselves, and a lot of times it's like, oh, they're my friend, we're using together, and it's that kind of situation, and not to minimize the severity of people are losing their lives obviously from this, but so I think we are asking for incarcerative sentences in these cases, and we're not always, when they're going to contested hearings on sentencing, we're not always getting what we're asking for.
Right, you're not. And that happens with any
but we
case.
are seeing there usually is an incarcerative period there as a punishment. So and maybe hopefully some programming while they're in the facility. But
how do you feel about that? Do you think we're doing a good job as far as programming in the facilities right now, or do you think that we all need a little work?
Yeah, right now I think we just have we have RRP, which is the risk reduction programming, and then on the sex offender side, we do have the sex offender programming still in the facility. Would I love to see more programs? Yes, absolutely. I think it's really hard right now. They're really understaffed, and I just
are those
I'd love
things
to
that
see
you
it,
can
but
impose? Can you impose that as part of the sentence that these things be completed before release? Does that happen?
So I sometimes so it's hard because we can't, I mean, obviously we can't say, oh, you need to do this before you're released. Otherwise, especially if it's not something that's available in the facility. Usually though, if we're talking about just and so this is where it gets into like complicating like sentencing. So if it's just a 2-serve sentence, so let's say, okay, we're going to say 2 to 10 to serve, you are going to go in and DOC is going to decide, they're going to case staff you, and they're going to decide what programming is appropriate for you. If we're talking about a split to serve, so where it's a probation sentence, but you're going to jail for a certain period of time, then we can say, okay, you need to do this programming. And if they can do it in the facility, then they would be required to do it in the facility.
And I think that's something that you just said is really important for people to know and understand as well, is that you do your job, but you don't, unless they recommit a crime, really once they leave the courthouse, it separates you, because DOC takes over and it's their rule. And even DOC could decide tomorrow, we're going to put these 10 people out on furlough because we just really don't have a staff for them here in the prison. We're going to put a bracelet on them. And even if they haven't necessarily, I know there's guidelines and you got to, you have to serve a certain amount of time, and you can only, but you could possibly leave 60 days early, 90 days early. And I think it's even as much as 120 now.
So I think you're talking about like the reintegration furlough type stuff. Yeah. So that's all DOC.
Yeah. That has nothing to do with your decision.
Yeah. And then they also, we have earned time credit now. So for I think it's every 30 days, you get 7 days off your sentence. So, anyway, that's
Yeah,
something
they've gone
else
back
that
and forth with
that's
that over the years too.
but that wasn't so much DOC. That was, obviously
The
the
legislature.
legislature.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. But yeah, if you go back and see, if you can look and see like an old sentence, you sometimes you can see if you get their sentence computation stuff, that you can see all the old credit things that we used to have in place. And anyway, just
Yeah.
we've had all sorts of different things in the past, but right now we have the earned time credit.
But there are so many things that go along with your position. I mean, you're just on the other side of the aisle as far as an attorney goes. So you can only present, ask, and hope, but that doesn't mean that that's what you're always going to get, because you never know what the judge is going to say, or
Right.
a jury's going to say, or you're not going to know necessarily at the time of the charges what the pre-sentence investigation is going to reveal,
Mhm.
or there's so much involved in it that it may not even be the result that you want it to be, but that doesn't
Right.
mean that wasn't your thought.
Right. Yeah. No, the only time we know for sure what a sentence is going to be is when it's agreed to. And even then the judge could potentially, they have the ultimate say, so they could potentially reject a plea deal. It doesn't happen very often, but it does occur every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, otherwise, if we go to trial and we, even with a conviction, it's going to be up to the judge. We can argue for a certain sentence. There are times when we have a kind of like an agreed upon cap, and so the state will argue for a certain sentence, and the defense will argue for something else, and ultimately the judge gets to decide anything within that cap that's been agreed upon.
Oh, let's see. Would you advocate to classify selling drugs as a violent crime?
That is an interesting, and so I think that probably the what I'm assuming what they're trying to get at is when it's violent crimes where we can ask for a hold without bail. I guess I think the better way would be to include other charges. So, for example, the distribution with death resulting, that kind of stuff, including that as falling under either as of, I don't know how it would necessarily fall under a violent crime, but having that included as something that we could ask for a hold without bail. As the selling, so many times it's people are doing it because to keep up with their own habit. And if it's more than that, a lot of times we are asking for bail, just because then we've got the flight risk argument in there. So,
right, that they and when you talk about bail, is there transparency in bail? Like, if you have somebody come in on a drug charge and you set a bail and someone bails them out, do you know who bails them out? Do you know if it's their dealer, or if it's their person that is bailing them out? It's like, we don't want them talking to you.
So we can see, it will list who is the person who bailed them out, or the bail bonds company. Now, if for in your example, if the person went to a bail bondsman and provided the collateral that they need for the bail bondsman, we're just going to know who the bail bondsman is.
Right. You wouldn't
you'd have to
necessarily know if
right.
it was, would, that isn't. And so going back to the question about the family, things in the community that help families stay together when they identify their issues. So that's what she was meaning by the family support, or when asking about thoughts on preventative programming. So if a family member came and said, this is our issue, are there things, or what are your thoughts on the things in the community to help families stay together?
Yeah, so I think there are programs out there that I think help in some ways with this, as far as if we're looking at help with childcare, that kind of stuff, or um, as far as if we're talking about like addiction issues and keeping the family together, um, I think if you're, as long as you're, this is more of a DCF area, but I think, if you're addressing the addiction and getting into treatment and getting on a maintenance program, that's going to be probably the biggest thing.
The best thing for
yeah.
you. Yeah, it's not really on the criminal side of things, but I think we all agree that, sure, in most cases, that's a great thing to have happen, but not in all.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it can't be avoided, and nor should it actually in some cases. Let me see. So, lots of strong opinions, of course, when it comes to the drug use and different crimes, and charges are filed, but that's what we were just talking about. Charges aren't really filed and ignored. It's they're still, just because an officer charges somebody with something and then it goes to your desk. But then what happens? You get a citation. You say, somebody says so and so was cited.
Yeah. So then the paperwork comes to our office. We review it. We make sure, we've got the elements for the charges that they've been cited for. Sometimes we add charges. Sometimes we decline charges. And then they come in for arraignment. If they're coming in on a citation, most likely we're just asking for conditions of release, and we don't really, in those situations, we'd have a hard time asking for bail, just because bail is based on a risk of flight, or a risk of trying to evade prosecution, essentially. So not necessarily that you're going to leave the state, but that you're not going to continue to come and address the criminal
problem.
Charges. And so with conditions of release, we are supposed to be asking for and imposing the least restrictive conditions that ensure the safety of the public. So, a lot of times there will be conditions we ask for, they don't get imposed because the court may not feel that it's the least restrictive condition.
Again, it's not the it's up to the judge what's imposed and what's not imposed.
And then we have a condition that says it requires a responsible adult. So we can only ask for that for certain cases. It has to involve I believe like a violent crime. So we're restricted on when we can ask for those, that as well. And that's just, that's the way it's written in that statute, unfortunately. So,
and I know that we've said that things in Washington County are actually they're not really backed up. You guys have all kept up, and the flow is good, and there's good. Do you feel that there's anything that you would like to change, or that you would like to see change, not just in Washington County, but throughout the state? Is there like one thing that you...
That's a good question. I would have to think about it for a second. I think, for me, the biggest thing has been, one thing I would love to see is to have like a statewide standard for when we issue Giglio Brady letters. I don't think it's fair that, in certain counties they've never issued one, and other counties, they're issuing them or not frequently, but I think there should be something that people can look to and be like, okay, this is when they're going to be issued. We're putting people on notice. This is when you can end up with this, because it does have a lot of consequences as far as, for law enforcement and their employment.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you explain what that is, just so that people
sure.
know what that means? So
a Giglio or a Brady letter is something that's issued when there is a question as to the credibility of law enforcement officers. So they, lie under oath, or, anything that would lead to a question about their credibility. And right now it's mostly dealt with through the state's attorneys. And we don't have, the ACLU just created a statewide database, but prior to that, we didn't have a database for that. So an officer could move from one department to another, if they're going out of county, and they wouldn't necessarily, that other county wouldn't necessarily even know that there was this Brady or Giglio letter out there. So,
so you feel that there should be transparency.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's important.
And that's at a legislative level, I'm assuming, as well? Or is that something that you can decide in the county?
So I think it's something that probably the state's attorneys can in part work together on, hopefully. But yeah, I think I think also it's something that if the Attorney General decided to take on, that's something that's probably the best place for it to happen.
That's where it's better suited to happen.
Because, they have jurisdiction in all the counties. So, I just think that we need to know when these letters are being issued. I think people should know, what the policy on when they're going to be issued. And I think it should be fair across the state. So aside from that, I think, although we've worked really hard in Washington County through COVID to keep things moving, we still, went for over a year without jury trials. So we do have cases that need to be tried that are serious cases, victims that have been waiting for, a resolution in their case. So, my priority is going to be to try to keep moving those and getting those.
And that's definitely no fault of, that is literally the fault of the pandemic and the shutdown. It's everything all around that has happened. And, I can't imagine the slack you're getting from people that not just, I mean, obviously the victims, but the people that are maybe incarcerated or waiting to be sentenced, or they probably want it done too.
Yeah.
It's a long time to drag it all out for all of you.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. And we, through the pandemic, kept track of who was incarcerated, and Judge Morrissey didn't let us forget, who was incarcerated. And so we were coming back and coming, even if it was just a status conference, just to see, okay, does this have to go to trial? And if not, let's get it resolved. Like, let's, try to have resolutions and not just have people sitting in jail pending trials.
So with only a few days to go, what are your thoughts as far as taking over soon? I mean, it's not that far away, because then we're only till November, right?
November for the general election.
Immediate.
No, not till February. Yeah. So, it's in some ways it's I mean, even though I'm there, it's still daunting, because it's knowing that, okay, it's going to be, the buck stops here, right? So,
right.
And I just want to make sure I do a good job. I love what I do. I love the office, and I just want to keep up the good work that Rory's already started. So that's my biggest thing, is I just want to make sure that we continue to do this good work, and
And you've said you are willing to continue to do something like this and have transparency and communications with the community, and answer questions like this that you've said you feel
absolutely.
This is important.
I think it's really important that people understand how the criminal justice system works. And I think a lot of times I've gotten a lot of questions about the bail thing and the catch and the release. And so, understanding, okay, we can only ask for bail in certain situations. We can only ask for hold with out bail on certain charges. And, explaining this, making sure people know, this is how it works in Vermont. And,
right. It's not necessarily what you want either. It's because you have to follow the rules.
Right.
There's a set of things and procedures that you need to do, and you can't just say, I don't want to do that with this guy. It has to be that way no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's important. I know Alfonso came on and chatted about treatment court, which I thought was awesome. And I think it's a great program that we have here in Vermont and in Washington County.
It is. I want to talk to him because I'm hoping that we can find a way to get treatment court to participate in the candlelight vigil that happens in White River on the 31st because it's Overdose Awareness Month.
Yep.
And to hear that this one and this one and this one passed away of an overdose is one thing, but to actually be there and hear each individual name read and the candles lit for each individual one. And last year, I mean, we were up over 200 and we're well over the 200 mark now. To be there in person is pretty intense. I think I cried almost the whole time, actually. I think it would be important even for Alfonso or just the treatment court team themselves to be present.
Yeah.
And then I would love for people that are involved, though, that are, that's what they're doing for a sentence, to really be there or at least watch it on our live Zoom, or I'm going to be live again this year down there, and eventually I'll get it here in Washington County. But it's pretty intense.
I can imagine it's pretty powerful.
It is.
Yeah.
It is very. And so, you have moms and dads there speaking, and brothers and sisters and people of all, it affects everyone, and the community, the people that have been hurt, the businesses, the people, but the families also of the addict. It's a tough road, and not in all cases. And that's the sad part too, is I think that we don't always all see where it starts. There are some cases that come across your desk where you have somebody that's 18, 17, whatever, and this is what they've known their whole lives because it's what their parents do. And how do you untrain that and give them the tools to move on and come out of that shithole?
Occasionally I don't do a lot of the drug stuff. I handle mostly the assaultive docket, but as a defense attorney, I was always amazed. The judge would sometimes ask, when did you start using? And, people would say 12 to me, I have kids that age, and I'm like, they're babies still. Like, that just seems
it seems impossible.
So young to me. Yeah. But that, that's the reality. And, that's when you're starting stuff that young, man, that's a hard addiction to addiction's a hard thing to end anyway. So, yeah.
And if it's literally what you learned from your parents, it's got to be even more tough, because in a way it seems right, just like anything else you teach your kids. And that's what I always say, is that even as far as us having more treatment in different facilities here, different means while incarcerated to get the help that you need, sometimes I think the bigger piece needs to be, well, one, more community involvement, but just to help people with life lessons and, how to manage their money and how to properly fill out an application, do a resume, how to dress. No, the back of your pants should not be hanging at the bottom of the cheeks of your ass. That kind of stuff. And I don't know how we get there.
Yeah.
I don't know how we get there. And maybe someday you'll get to impose a sentence of home ec or something.
Right.
Who knows? But
Right.
for the younger people,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, and not even necessarily younger. Some people, the only thing they've known their entire life is how to hustle.
Yeah.
If that's all you know, and the only thing you know is to rob somebody or steal, or if that's literally all you know, you have to be taught something different. And I wish there could be a sentence for that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Well, talk about
sentence you to
talking
mean
about
grandmas.
programs that I think would be great in the facility are I think other states have programs where you get to learn a trade. Other countries I know certainly have it. You get to learn a trade or you do some schooling, and I think you could probably do so. I don't know if you can get your high school degree through or a GED in the facility not, but
you can. Yep.
But I think more than that. I mean, that's kind of you have to have that
and
nowadays.
They used to in the women's prison, in a lot of the in Windsor they used to have the sign shop, and the they made the license plates, they made furniture, they did all kinds of different things in different facilities, and they've kind of gotten away with that and done away with it. And I think that that's actually a shame that there isn't more of that. Yeah, that would be good if we were teaching that instead. But before we go, let's tell everybody why we're going to vote for you.
Well, I am obviously currently working in the office. I've been here I've been working for the Washington County State's Attorney's Office for over 3 years now. I think we've been working hard, and I want to continue that great work that we've done. And I live in this community. I love this community. I grew up here. So I feel passionate about Washington County, and I want to ensure that we continue the public safety here.
I think we're definitely on a good path to that, and I hope to see that as well. So before we go, I have to remind everybody that Thunder Road is hopefully tonight. We shall see. Post time is supposed to be at 7:00. It's the 100 lap main event for the Flying Tigers, and the Mountaineers are in the playoffs at 6:30 is the first pitch tonight, Recreation Field. So we will confirm that all of that's still happening, and nobody has decided already to not go because of positively upcoming weather. And we'll do the same thing for the concerts in the park and food truck Thursday, and maybe we'll
stay hydrated if they do happen.
Drink. They're very hot. There's actually a heat advisory in effect. High winds, damaging or a possible flash flooding, damaging hail. How we can have hail when it's 98 degrees, I'll never know. But it happens. JD will have to explain it to me. But anyways, thank you so very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
We greatly appreciate you, and we wish you the best of luck. And
thanks. You guys have been great.
Yeah, we'll see you at the finish line. That's what I like to say.
Yeah, I like that.